I work just to see if I can do it. I mean, see if I have this idea. It's different than a concept, because a concept in art rises and falls according to how you feel. If you have something that's physical, it may look banal some days. It might look like this, that, or whatever, but it's still there. It's not just.
So I brought something with me because I opened the paper yesterday and was reading the Times, and in the Metropolitan Diary there's a really nice letter that I'm going to read and ask you about. So it says, "Dear Diary, my wife and I were in New York recently, getting to know new grandson and packing in as much of the city as time afforded. The Guggenheim was a safe harbor against the cold winds, and the energy and forcefulness of James ROSENQUIST were on display to warm our souls. We noticed a large number of fathers guiding their children up the pale spiral, stopping to comment on the art and to answer questions. This was one conversation. Son asks, 'Why is this stuff a big deal?' The father responds, 'Because artists are like gods. They're different from the rest of us. They help us see things we didn't know were there.' Son, 'Why is that important?' Father, what you learn from artists stays with you forever. It can help you be a better person.' Son, 'Okay, Dad.'" So last time I checked, you don't think of yourself as a god, but your art, your art does impact people.
The only thing I'd like is 60 years after I'm dead, I'd love to come back for one day and see if any of my work is still around. This experience of having a retrospective is like seeing one's own stamp collection go right in front of them. And so I look at from one painting to another, and I laugh and cry and laugh and cry and laugh and cry because of remembering how bad I felt, how great I felt. My life flashes. So I feel very fortunate that these things bring back memories, because actually I existed for a while on the earth. As a child, I had to entertain myself because I was an only child, and I moved around a great deal during the World War II and so on, and I went to many different schools, and the things that happened to me, I remember. I mean, young people ask me this: well, "What do you think? How did you get started? What did you do?" And I said, well, if you go back and think autobiographically about your life, maybe there's something very peculiar that happened to you, and you might want to say something about it. Being on a farm in North Dakota at sunset, there was an optical illusion. It looked like a 4-story white horse walking by. I ran in the house. I said, "Mama, there's this big horse out there." And it just was the neighbor's stallion got loose and was walking across the horizon. So I was painting these emblems for Phillips 66 on top of gas tanks. And in South Dakota, I was on top of one of those big round ball gas tanks. Nobody around for miles. And there was a railroad spur went right by there. And it's hotter than hell, and I'm painting. And I look down the railroad track, and I see a teeny weeny figure come running. He's running like a little train. He's running up the track. So I take my time, wash up, and I climb down this stairway, and I go down, and I'm standing by the edge of the track waiting for this person to go by. And it turned out to be a little boy with no shoes, wearing bib overalls, and I says, "What's the matter?" He says, horses, they got new horses down in the corral. I'm going to see these new horses." And then he took off. And then I went back, and I saw him going down a road like a train. And it was really a peculiar time idea of seeing something and coming and going, and the time it took to go do that. And that's the way it is out there in the flat, the flat country out there in the Dakota. That was North Dakota. And I won a scholarship to the Art Students League in New York. I called it an out-of-town scholarship. I studied with Morris Cantor, Vitlev Vitlichel, George Gross, Edwin Dickinson. Edwin was a little tiny guy, and he said, He's an incredible artist. He says, the reason why artists have such difficulty drawing and painting in Manhattan is that Manhattan isn't situated exactly north and south. And the light that comes in the window throws them off. After the Art Students League, I transferred into the Billboard Painters Union. And my first job doing that, this is about pop art now. I'm getting long-winded, but anyway. My first job was painting a Hebrew National Salami sign on a Flatbush extension for 6 months later. I don't think it was Mr. Henry Bevins. I don't think he remembered me. And he said, we can always use a good man here. So I had painted 2 more heads for Coca-Cola. He says, not bad. Now move the whole nose over ½ an inch. This big, soft arabesque. It was for Coca-Cola. It was very, very fussy, too. Everything had to be perfect. So I worked there a while and went to work for General Outdoor Advertising on Atlantic Avenue. They said, James, go out to Canarsie and paint this Shenley whiskey bottle, 2 stories tall. Here's the copy. Go paint that. So I did. And on the label it said, this spirit is made from the finest grains, and so on. Then he said, James, we got another one, paint another one. I was painting up to number 50. I painted 50 of the damn things. I was bored out of my mind. I could paint them blindfolded, left to right, upside down, anything. So finally, I got so tired. On the label in the script, I wrote, Mary had a little lamb as fleece as white as snow. Bottle. And when I think of it now, that's what I think pop art became. It was like a numbness that one came from being bombarded by advertising as an American. It's the capitalist system, whatever. So that continued. And I went to work at Times Square for Artcraft Strauss, and my audition was painting a big head of Kirk Douglas. And I could really paint, and I put saliva on his lips, tears in his eyes, the number 5 makeup. Old Mr. Strauss says, hire that young fellow. He was 80 years old, so I got a job. And I painted the Astor Victoria sign 7 times, which was 395 feet wide and 58 feet high. I painted the DeMille. I dropped a gallon of purple paint off the DeMille Theater on 47th, 7th Avenue at noon on a nobody got killed. I dropped a ladder off 11 stories off the building accidentally, and it came down directly like this, and one edge hit the curb and one edge hit the street, and all the rungs broke, and it split. Nobody got killed. It's just pure luck. I could paint any picture. A painting, which was to paint, all I wanted to do was make a mysterious painting by putting different recognizable things in space in different sizes, so one would recognize the largest one last. How can I do a dichotomy of a mysterious thing when something is right in your nose, right in your face? So that's how my work got started.
Turn the evening over to our stars, and we'll ask Walter and Sarah to begin the conversation with 2 of America's greatest artists of the 20th century, Robert Rauschenberg and James ROSENQUIST.
I really wanted to learn how to paint the Sistine Chapel. Cubism, how to make an exciting picture plane. I think I was born with the ability to draw. And my mother said, you're always drawing all the time, maybe you can make some money at that. You'll see at sidewalk art shows people who can draw portraits, and they're very good, but these heads on these papers look like they're floating around. They're not on the ground. They're like balloons. And then later on, I really wanted to learn how to paint the Sistine Chapel. I thought, anyway, I got a scholarship to the Art Students League in 1955, and they had a mural class in there, but the mural was only 5 feet high and about 8 feet long. Big mural, nothing. So my interest was, how do you make a dynamic picture? So my first great teacher I had, his name was Cameron Booth, who studied with Hans Hofmann after he was a World War I veteran. He really, because he was a student of Hans Hofmann, he really wanted to show you how to make something look dynamic, whether it was a total non-objective abstraction or even a realistic painting, whatever, it had dynamism, it had something to it, and that's what I was after. Then I saw a photograph of two guys painting the Astor Victoria Theater sign in Times Square, which is 395 feet wide and 58 feet tall, and it was Frank Rickert and David Michnick, and within about 3 years I was painting right alongside those two guys. David became my helper painting that big sign. I painted that sign about 8 times with a couple of crews. But to me, outdoor billboard painting was the lost art of trying to learn how to paint the Sistine Chapel, because what we did was take any kind of image, square it off, and make it a certain, we had to make it a certain size, whether it was 2-3 stories tall or however big it was. We have to change the scale with a simple device we used to call the Brooklyn Bridge. So anyway, that's what I was after, and that's what I appreciated. And I thought if I could gain that kind of power, I could do about anything.
You can.
Look at J.W. Turner. I mean, look at Rubens. Look at those guys. What they did, and they had to make all their own brushes, and they grind all their own paint and everything else, which took a long time even just to get started. So it's interesting that I think I'm fortunate that this has happened, to have big retrospectives or whatever, because I'm always surprised that people collected what I did, whatever I did, and they remind me of my my life at that particular time.
I'd seen his art at that point. What did you think of him once you saw his art, his work?
I'd seen his
I
art,
didn't know
yeah.
you'd seen it.
It just keeps getting better.
Thank you, Bob. A couple of years ago, someone showed me a film, a CBS movie of George Siegel's first show at Sidney Janis, 1964, I think it was. I think it was his first show. Anyway, it was a show, George Siegel's work. But they filmed most of the program in my show in 1964. So that was very peculiar, and seeing this black and white program with all these people circling around, and I said, look, there's Pharaoh, there's Andy Warhol, there's Armand, there's various people. It was very interesting. Also Leo Castelli, too, who was an incredible gentleman and very funny, but he only told me 2 jokes in his life. But anyway, he was a very unusual fellow. He would always ask me what the title of my paintings were. And I always worked so hard and try to be with no titles. I wanted something pure visually, like falling in love with a deaf mute, for instance, like just seeing something, no other titles, no other words or anything. So then he'd say, well, Jim, what is the title of this painting? So then I'd have to go back and figure out what the hell, I have to think of a title. So then on Leo's car, he had this BMW, his license plate says untitled. That was the Well, for me, coming to New York 1955, the hardest thing in New York is living. The best thing about New York is meeting people. I've met so many amazing people, and it continues and continues and continues, and it's really fantastic.
And amazing people do amazing things.
Yes, they do. I came to New York with $350 in my pocket, and I would walk all around Manhattan, usually on the waterfront, to try to find the most beautiful studio there was, even if I didn't have any money. I thought, boy, would I like to live there? Would I like to be there? So I got downtown by Wall Street, and I went in a cafe, and I says, is there anything to rent around here? And the guy says, yeah, there's an artist living upstairs. Why don't you go up there? So I went up and I knocked on the door. Just as I knocked on the door, Mr. Rauschenberg came up behind me. Quite a different person than he is today, because he seemed very shy, wearing granny glasses, very shy, and he told me about this sandwich shop where you could get this guy rented out lofts. So I went into the sandwich shop, and the guy says, I got a place for $15 a month. Is that too much for you? I knew Bob was an incredible, I heard he was an incredible guy. He did window displays, all sorts of things to scrape up $1, and that's exactly what I needed, was $1.
There are three kinds of art: good, bad, and indifferent. And I believe, like Gertrude Stein did, that when you're in the presence of something really good, the little bell rings. And it certainly rang for these two artists. The minute I saw their work, I thought it was fantastic.
This is in the beginning of working on Horizon Home Sweet Home, and this photograph is by Claude Picasso when he was a photographer, 69, 70. This was an experiment with colored panels and a dry ice fog so that people would look like sculptures with no bases, and you couldn't see the floor, and the light of the fog would blend right into the walls.
Nobody knows what's happening in front of 420.
The terrible temper of the time, the September 11th tragedy.
I did that room 26 years ago in New York at 4 East 77th Street, and it has about a 2 or 3 feet deep dry ice fog, so it's like an infinity with color panels going into an infinity with chrome mylar.
I feel as though I've been melted, that I was melted being in the room with all the fog. It was like a tropical rainforest. 77?
The old gallery uptown, yes. So this is a repeat.
Did James
that was the size of the room uptown. So I didn't remember it that small.
Not the size that matters, but the quality, right? So
anyway, you have wrong memories about the size of things.
Is this the exact same installation then?
It's exactly the same, yes. So we try to make it as close as possible to what it was then, yes.
And it was the idea, and then back in 70, it was the idea of an astronaut or someone trying to find their way home.
Looks very mythological.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
You should come and see this because you can see like what it looks like through the camera. That's a pretty good picture. So you can see your
The paintings here in the museum are done, a lot of them are done almost 40-some years ago. So the people look at them today and they think, well, maybe they were painted yesterday, but they weren't. And so it's just that this time that they were painted in had certain influences and certain interests to young people that they may or may not have today. So that's to interpret the pictures or talk about them, I have to try and remember and go way back as to what I was doing and what I was thinking and how I was getting along and how I was starving and everything else. There I am as a young fellow in 1964 in my studio on Broome Street, starting to work on this. We're working on this F-111 painting. This is more of that painting, F-111. It's in the show upstairs. This painting came from a multiplicity of ideas. The first one was really the idea of peripheral vision, which I used to talk to Barney Newman about. And then I saw a photograph of Monet putting paintings around the floor and him standing in the middle, and his eye was filled with his own color that he dictated. So the idea is whatever one looks at is what it is because of all the peripheral vision that comes into one's eye. Then also at the same time I met Paul Berg from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and he had just come back from a combat mission for a police action in Vietnam, and he told me all about that. So there was a number of ideas that went into this painting about the economy, income taxes to develop war weapons, and many, many other ideas. Then after that, it was criticized mainly for being an anti-war painting. try work just to see if I can do it. I mean, see if I had this idea. It's different than a concept, because a concept in art rises and falls according to how you feel. If you have something that's physical, it may look banal some days. It might look like this, that, or whatever, but it's still there. This is Star Thief. I painted in 1980, and I had a large Life magazine asked me if I was doing anything large. They'd like to photograph it. At the same time, CBS, this is a multimedia event, CBS said, Bob Adelman, the photographer, would like to photograph you doing a large painting, and we're going to put it on CBS Sunday morning. So we had this experience. I was painting, there's a CBS tape about this, painting the painting whilst, which ran 8 pages in Life magazine plus this television program. Then it was installed in Leo Castelli's gallery down on Green Street in 1980.
It's like you see the piles of empty glasses in the Holocaust. Remember? Piles of empty things. And you say, look at that. There's a lot of minds there. I did that room in New York at 4 East 77th Street, and it has about a 2 or 3 feet deep dry ice fog, so it's like an infinity with color panels going into an infinity with chrome mylar. And it was in the idea of that, and then back in '70, it was the idea of it, an astronaut or someone trying to find their way home.
He does very critical things. He's gone to Turkey and done some things for them.
I don't know how many shows of yours I videoed at Leo's, but...
Yeah, I worked with him for 30 years and had a show almost every year. I was a good friend with Bill de Kooning. I knew Franz Klein, good friend of Barney Newman. Who else? I met Rothko a few times, but no friendly.
Oh my God.
But I knew all those guys, but Pollock I just missed. And I used to go to the Cedar Bar. The door was missing off the toilet. So I said, how come? And he said, oh, Jackson ripped the door off the toilet. So then I went there again and the door was on. And then I went again and the door was off. I said, the door's off the toilet. He says, yeah, we're not going to put it on because he keeps ripping the door off the toilet.
Yes, it's excellent.
It's all there. We're ready for the on performance.
Be in it. Okay.
Or someone trying to find their way home.
An astronaut or someone trying to find their way home.
I was one of the first to lose my feet.
It feels very theatrical, doesn't it? I mean, think of all of the stage productions that you have seen over the years with this happening, but you've never been in it before.
An astronaut or someone trying to find their way home.
What? Jackson forever lives in our hearts.
Marvelous.
And also what I love is that I think it should be permanent somewhere. And they're hard colors, but so luscious too.
This is called the stowaway peers out at the speed of light. That idea came from Einstein's theory and ideas that the traveler and the spectator see the same things differently because of this refraction of light and the speed of light. So I was saying in this painting is what you see is what you don't get. You're seeing the residue because of the speed of light, but what's really underneath it, what you don't get, is the archaeology of all the artist's experience in the underpainting of the painting. So it was really a pun. It's a pun. I worked just to see if I can do it. I mean, see if I had this idea. It's different than a concept, because a concept in art rises and falls according to how you feel. If you have something that's physical, it may look banal some days, it might look like this, that, or whatever, but it's still there. It's not just a
Double N.
DANNIEIELLE. So good
Pablo.
art.
And Pablo, Pievolo, like Picasso. Not Picasso, but.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Sorry.
Hi. Konnichiwa.
To a Vietnam vet, Jim.
This is a late painting called Joystick. It's about aviation. It's about the atmosphere as being solid. Air as being really like a solid. If you hit it hard, it hurts. So it's about flying. And also, my mother and father were aviators back in 1931, and my mother looked very sporty wearing her jodhpurs and her flying helmet, and that all stopped when we had a relative killed, who was named after Albert Hedberg. He crashed, and the Depression came along. That was the end of that. So aviation has been a thing in the back of my mind. My father worked in aviation until he retired. When I was a little boy in 1938, a big fat lady got hit by a meteor as big as a baseball, and it came through the roof of her house, hit her on the hip, and went through the floor. Started off initially, I painted a painting called The Meteor Hits Picasso's Bed. Then the meteor hits Monet's garden, and the meteor hits Brancusi's pillow. It's called The Dog Descending a Staircase. You see the lady of the house on the right, the man of the house in the middle, and his business on the left. This is called the glass wishes. And the glass wishes it wasn't broken. It wasn't broken. It's called Highway Trust. And all of us in here pay for automobiles whether we own them or not because of President Eisenhower's law to build the Highway Trust, which is building linear systems around our country. And so this is like big load of cement inside of an automobile. At the same time, I heard of this guy who came home and he saw some guy's car parked in his wife's garage. It was her boyfriend or lover or whatever, so he was in the cement business, so he poured the guy's car full of cement. So I told that to Bob Skull, the taxi guy, and he says, "That was a pretty heavy car." Anyway, this is in the exhibition. It's called I Love You With My Ford. And I thought of this as the idea of like a trifocal vision. You just, in contemporary vision, contemporary information, you see flashes of things in your life, contrary to the old manner of schooling, where you would, of the idea of push and pull in the movement of a painting composition. It's more like blink, blink, blink. Here's a very small painting called Hey, Let's Go for a Ride. And it's just the attitude of something thrust in your contemporary thing, thrust in your face as something as an identification very quickly. I sold this painting for $350 to Burton and Emily Tremaine. Then later was sold, I think, for $375,000 a few years after that. I would have loved to have more paintings in the exhibition, but it's an impossibility because of the size of the building and so on. And mainly, it's the problem of getting loans. I had a huge retrospective in Moscow in 1991, and it was almost as large as this show, and not quite. The insurance cost for that show was $58,000 from Huntington Block. And now I think it's millions of dollars to get. Tom Krenz asked me if I'd like to have a show about 6 years ago. And since then, you know, we've experienced the terrible temper of the times, including a bad economy and the September 11th tragedy and a number of ups and downs in our economy. So finally it came to fruition, and I'm very happy that this happened. Like seeing a man or a woman walking through palm fronds and seeing these shards, where if you could make a suggestion by doing that, it's not anti-women at all. It's an aesthetic idea, and I think it goes beyond being anti-anything, where you still have a whole ground to paint in, and you can make a suggestion with these slivers of images of people. I did a number of paintings with panels above the surface of the canvas. There's one example in this show called Broome Street Trucks, but it would make a lot of sense to anybody, it would make some sense if you saw the number of pictures that were made like that, including Capillary Action, this one, and a number of other paintings. And that's also the problem with having a show and getting one example of a series of paintings. People say, well, isn't that interesting? That's odd, or what is that? But they don't get the idea. This is called Waves. You see this young lady is kissing some guy, but she really wants to beat it. She wants to leave. This is called Tumbleweed, owned by Virginia Wright in Seattle. This is called Conveyor Belt. It was a notion that we all are on different conveyor belts at different speeds in our life, and sometimes we associate with one another, and then one speeds up and one slows down, and you don't see them again. But it's just like relationships with different people at different rates of speed, and a lot of other empty things in this, empty items in this picture. Empty billfold, empty automobile tire, a spoon reflecting my studio, because I was hungry, an empty spoon, and so on. This is called Chambers. When I bought a building on Chambers Street in the 70s, I was the artist on the west end of Chambers Street, and the law, City Hall was on the other end of the east side of Chambers Street. So it's this, you have the law on one end and me on the other. This is called my second 46-foot painting called Four Nuclear Women, which was about Margaret Thatcher and Indira Gandhi and women leaders of the world who were either clear women or nuclear women. This is called Terrarium. Paul Anka, the composer, bought this thing and I think then gave it to his wife. I think they're divorced. Anyway, it's an idea from Zen Koan where it's an unanswerable question. You have a favorite bottle and your favorite pet climbs in the bottle and starts to grow, and what do? You either kill the pet and save the bottle, or smash the bottle and smash the bottle, save your pet, or let the animal die, whatever. But it's really about love in a bottle. This is called Heir Apparent. It's about the heir to an oil well family. I did a number of doll paintings because of the terrible affliction of AIDS around the world. It continues in other parts of the world, and it was about the idea of seeing a baby doll during the holidays, and some child said, "Mama, Mama, I want that, I want that." No matter what it looks like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Boom, they want that. It could be ugly, whatever. It's like young people trying to have a love affair and having to make a business proposition out of having to make a love affair. I thought it was really a sad situation because of this scourge and this disease. So I photographed about 500 different baby dolls covered with plastic, and I selected just a few. I didn't invent any abstraction. I just painted them the way I saw them, no matter how ugly or good they were.
I think most people think of you mainly as a painter, and I know you think of yourself mainly as a painter, and yet you have worked in a number of media and mediums, and you're a fabulous printmaker. They're beautiful collages, which we included in the show, and drawings. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your printmaking or your collage technique.
We have one brilliant printmaker here in the front row, Don Saff, sitting right there. Don, put up your hand. Don. He developed Graphic Studio in Tampa, Florida, which was an amazingly good idea, because what it did was to actually bring people together as a community. He had artists who were already known but hadn't made many prints come and make prints there. And then there were subscribers who bought them, and then they would meet each other. And they had a group. They became a group. They became, it's a marvelous thing. And the best thing about it is that you don't want isolationism in a country, even when it goes to global isolationism. You don't want isolationism at home either. And so it's good. It's a very wonderful idea to try to get people to know their neighbors. Anyway, printmaking, the only reason for doing print is to experiment. When I was a little boy, I lived next to a big dump ground at one time, and I pretended I was an archaeologist, and I would try to find things in this dump ground. All I could find was an old Coca-Cola bottle or a refrigerator door. No magazines, no nothing. So the paper that's put into contemporary magazines is a lot of it is clay, and it disintegrates. So the culture, what you know as of now, will just disappear. You won't know what the photographs or whatever will just be gone. So when you make a print, it's put on the finest Chinese rag paper pulp. It'll last as long as a Coptic tapestry. And so whatever, good or bad, whatever is on there is going to be around a long time. So it's a responsibility to try something good on it. But printmaking is I do it I make it very basically. I don't really use much, and I don't use any photography really. It's all drawn by hand, and I try to mix the colors on the piece of paper to get more out of it. And
I don't know, I don't think they're basic at all. Some of them are huge. I think your largest print is like 35 feet long, and it's almost like an object because you've used paper pulp, and there are a lot of different elements. There's collage going on. I mean,
I was
really dramatic.
experimental, though, totally experimental. It's just, and that for me is the only reason to do it, because of, in this day and age.
After I read this, I thought, you know, certainly your art does impact people, but how do you want it to impact people? How do you want people to interact and react to your art? Or even
No,
one work in particular.
No. I paint things because, to prove to myself I actually had an idea, because it's physical. I actually had this idea, and so I painted. And then later on, somebody else comes along and looks at it, likes it, whatever, and then they show it or it gets seen, and then all of a sudden if more than 2 or 3 people like it, you have someone who wants to buy it, whatever. So it's basically, it's, you know, this may sound like you've heard it before, but I work just to see if I can do it. I mean, see if I have this idea. It's different than a concept, because a concept in art rises and falls according to how you feel. If you have something that's physical, it may look banal some days. It might look like this, that, or whatever, but it's still there. It's not just a concept.
Or other artists who are part of the pop generation are no longer with us, and I think you often talk about how that has affected you. How do you think it's changed your work, or do you think you've responded? How do you think your work has responded to the loss of these other artists, or how has your life changed without them?
Well, I mean, my goodness, you know, Roy Lichtenstein was a lovely person. Andy Warhol was a lovely guy. You just miss them because you feel like you're a fighter in a gymnasium. They're doing their thing, you're doing your thing, and you come back. I come back into New York, and I wonder what Roy's doing now, or what Andy doing now. And now they're not doing it, and so that's very, very sad. Also, there's Don Judd, Dan Flavin, many people that they're just not around, and it's really it's very sad.
And in terms of younger artists, are there any younger artists you respond to or appreciate or really like? Younger generations of artists?
What?
Are there younger generations of artists that you...
What about them?
Are there any in particular are there any particular younger artists you appreciate or respond to?
Yeah, well, young, God, they're much nicer than businessmen. You go into an office in 57th Street somewhere, and you don't know what's going on in there. I remember going in with 2 Broadway angels and showbiz guys, and you don't know what's what. The businessmen always sit like this, symmetrical, like this. You walk in, the artists are always like this. And you go, those are the artists. That's the artist. 'Cause they're like this. And so then the secretary comes up and says, "Gentlemen, here's notepads for you," and this man takes it, and the artist goes like this. I mean, what do I need this for? This notepad here. So anyway, artists are I love artists, because there's not many around. They're really a treasure, really. I think that's all.